Hello there, adventurers, and welcome to another episode of Neon's Game Night. Tonight, we're back taking a more in-depth look at Lost in Prayer and going over some of my experiences that I had in the closed playtest that ran from September 5th to September 17th, and going over some of the notes that I've taken over the course of the hours that I played, and giving a bit of feedback, and just sort of going over what I thought of the game. So I didn't play nearly as much as I would have wished. I only played for a little over 5 hours over the course of the playtest. Life and everything gets busy. It's hard to put in too many hours sometimes. So it's a very hardcore roguelike that does not hold your hand. It kind of throws you into the middle of things. They admit straight up off the bat that the odds are very much stacked against you, and it is up to you to try and get those odds back in your favor by any means necessary. So it's very hardcore. It's very in line with the way that 9 Dot Studio does their games. Previously, I mentioned they've made the game Outward, which is a sort of hardcore RPG that has some like survival elements, some kind of Soulsborne-esque elements, and stuff like that that make that game very interesting and very fun to play. And so they've definitely brought that to this. There's permadeath. You don't take anything, any of the skills or attributes that you've leveled up. You don't get to take any of that on into any subsequent runs. It's very hardcore. You rely on a lot of luck and a lot of skill and a lot of wits. And it's a very fun experience to have whenever you are able to get a few good runs chained together. It makes it feel like, you know, you're not just learning more of the game systems, but you're able to learn a bit more of like how to best utilize certain characters and their skills and their abilities. And it also makes it so that when you die, it doesn't feel like too bad of an issue to die. This game has a very unique twist when it comes to its death mechanics, in that whatever kills you, you have the ability to possess them afterwards. And as you are storming the gates of heaven, or storming the gates of hell, as the premise of the game has set up, you get to encounter a lot of different creatures between those two areas, and being able to die almost feels a bit like a reward, because not only are you learning more and you have an opportunity to take your knowledge into the next run, you also have the opportunity to maybe play as a new character to see what their skill set is and stuff like that. So that's a very interesting and unique twist. And even though it is permadeath, that is something that does feel like you get some sort of sense of progression going as you go through each run. But I took several notes while I was playing after the first game night video that I feel like I could just go over and talk about some of the pros and cons that I noticed as I was playing, and just go over some feedback from there. So I mentioned I played for a little over 5 hours. I noted on the positive side that the game had some very clean and legible UI, and that it runs really well. I only encountered one crash throughout my time in the playtest, and for it being a sort of a closed playtest, sort of an early build, I think that's pretty impressive. It ran extremely well. I didn't have any fluctuations in sort of FPS, no jittering or stuttering or anything like that. The user experience was a very good experience, being able to go through the menu, being able to control myself in battle, selecting skills. Everything operated on a very good level, and it operated exactly how I expected it to. And it's often said that with UI and sort of the user experience, if it's good, you don't really notice it, and you don't really tend to comment on it. And so try to make that note specifically because after having gone through a few runs, I was just noticing how easy things were, and that there wasn't any friction when it came to the user experience and the UI. So I wanted to be able to give that a bit of a note that says, I think the UI is really well, and the performance is also exceptional. When you get into battle, the turn order for all the different enemies and for yourself is very clearly displayed. It's easy to read. You can tell when enemies are moving. You can tell when an enemy is attacking. Things like that. There's nothing that really obfuscates the action that's going on There was never a time while I was playing the demo that I didn't know it was going on, which again I think is something to be commended. It feels very polished at this stage. As with all the stuff that I'm going to talk about, I could have easily put in a couple other dozen hours into the current build as it was, because I think the game is very fun and addictive, and everything just felt very polished, aside from a few little minor hiccups here and there that they've already been mentioning that they're going to address, but I'll get to that a little later. I noticed that I noted that death is fun. Like I was talking about before, death doesn't feel like a big punishment. Even on the runs that I've gotten a bit farther, when I died, I saw death as more of an opportunity than as a sort of punishment. And that's a really hard balance to strike. That's not something that every game is capable of doing. It never felt like dying was sort of hindering the fun aspect of the game. Now, that's very personal and very subjective, but the way that runs work in this game, and it being very the dungeons being procedurally generated and having a lot of randomization, sort of means that every time feels fresh. It doesn't really feel like you're being pushed backwards so much as you get to start new. I don't know if that makes too much sense, the way that I explained it, but it feels distinctly different than being pushed backwards, if that makes any sense. The tactical combat, once you get a bit of time to experiment with the different levels and all the different aspects on a game map, it's really fun to experiment with the tactical combat. There's traps. You can pull enemies into traps. You can trick them into falling down into the abyss. You can try to get them to walk into turret fire or crossbow fire and stuff like that. That makes the environment as much of a tool as your character's equipment, your character's skills, and your character's abilities. So I really loved that element. I think that was one of my more favorite elements of once I started getting into some of the further runs, was being able to sort of size up a situation and see how maybe I could take advantage of the environment and then successfully pull off a plan based off that. It's a very rewarding experience and really lends to that sort of addictive nature to each run, because you might go through the run again and have a completely different level layout that's going to create different opportunities. Likewise, even without just like being able to sit there and tactically think and plan, it also allows for a lot of different improvisation. There's a couple runs that I did. I don't know if I got these ones filmed, but there was one in particular where I got into the heat, the thick of it, and I was in big danger. And it was a lot of sort of as I was in danger, kind of looking around in the environment and trying to figure out, okay, based off of the skills I have available, the items I have available, and the environment around me, how can I possibly get out of this? And feeling a bit like MacGyver and being able to duct tape together a quick plan to see if you can sort of eke out just one more fight, made that feel just as rewarding, if not more so, than like getting another level or being able to ascend or descend into a new level of the dungeon. So that the tactical gameplay and tactical combat by itself is something that would keep me coming back to play more and more runs. Another thing that the game excels in at this point already is that there's a lot of ways to build each of the different kinds of characters. There's a lot of variety at play already, and that's in the characters that you're able to possess and play as well as the items, the skills, and the attributes that you're able to sort of build your character with. Every character has its own unique set of abilities, starting abilities and skills that can affect can really affect like how the game is played and how you're going to approach a different run. Some enemies are going to be very good at dealing a lot of high damage. Some will be better at kind of sneaking around and trying to get things that way. Others will be good at being big tanks and just soaking up a lot of damage and dealing a lot of damage back. So there's a lot of different variety there, and then that's not even to mentioning the equipment. The equipment can also be enchanted, that is able to give you different buffs, give you different skills in itself that will allow you to pull off different things in combat, give you a better chance to hit, better chance for criticals, a whole bunch of different stuff there with how you build your weapons and your equipment. The variety is a big selling point for me as well currently, because you can it doesn't feel like you're running the same thing over and over and over again. It feels like new and fresh every single time that I played. So after that, I've got a few negatives listed down of things that I experienced that were just points of friction as I played through the demo. Although I praised the user experience and navigating the game is very easy, movement can be a little bit awkward. You can click and hold to move your character around, and dragging the mouse, or you can just click and your character will move one block. That's where some things kind of get iffy for me. I kept wanting to, especially since everything is on a grid, I kept wanting to, like, if I'm in a situation where I have free actions, and it's not during like a battle and being turn-based, I want to be able to click across the room and for my character to kind of, run across the room. And you aren't able to do that in this rendition currently. You can move one block by clicking, or you can kind of move continuously by clicking and holding. And it's just one of those things that like kind of messes with my point and click brain. I feel like if I am able to control the mouse on the entire screen, and you can even select, like it'll have the little block pop up like where you select. If I'm able to click over at the corner of the room, I am just kind of coded by a lot of different games that do have that I'm going to be able to click that and my character is going to go over there. Also, doing the click and hold isn't the most precise. It doesn't feel the best whenever you're moving the character that way. It can just get kind of awkward when you're trying to navigate some areas, especially if you're in an area that has like traps. There were a couple times when I'd play and I'd be trying to like pick up loot and everything after a battle. And if I was pressing and holding and moving around, even if I didn't really feel like I was going into a trap, the way that the movement works, I just end up accidentally going into one of the traps and taking off HP or giving me a debuff, and that would contribute to possibly my run ending early. So that's just a bit of a bit of feedback. I'd love to be able to just click where I want to go and my character to be able to move there. And now obviously that same situation could occur where if I just kind of carelessly say I want to go to this corner of the room and there's traps in the way, and your character just says, okay, I'm going to beeline it, and goes over a trap. Obviously that kind of sets the same kind of thing, but then that's kind of on me, because I wasn't like, okay, I'm going to specifically say I want this block that's right next to the trap, and then kind of go around it that way, if that makes any sense. So that was just something that kind of got in the way of some more of my personal enjoyment of controlling the character, but your mileage may vary. Another thing that's a bit control related, I wish I could control the camera a bit more. I wish I could pan the camera down a bit more. Whenever you break into a new room, the camera will kind of sweep down, and you can kind of see more on like a sort of standing view as to like how the room looks like. But once it gives you power back to the character, you aren't able to go to that level again. You kind of are limited to a very limited range of camera zoom, and I don't know if it's part of wanting it to be a bit harder that way, but and that makes it harder to like see and gain an idea of like what's around corners and stuff. I could see that, but at the same time, there's plenty of ways in the game already that you're able to see through walls and see like what's happening on another side of a door without like being able to zoom in. And it just seems like the camera is cut off at a really arbitrary level, and especially when like sizing up where enemies are or trying to like just understand what I'm seeing in terms of the environment from across the room. It would be nice to just be able to pull that camera down just a bit further to be able to see, okay, I can see I've got 2 characters staring at me in the face, but there's 3 more at the end of the hall that I can see from here, but because of the angle, the camera angle, you aren't able to get actually a good look at in its current state. But you would if you just be able to tilt it down just a little more. That's a bit more of a minor thing, but that kind of goes back to some of those control elements. There was a couple of display bugs that happened throughout the course of the demo, just some item descriptions that were kind of overlaid with each other that kind of made those completely unreadable. But that's a bit of a minor thing that I'm sure will be an easy fix. The biggest thing that I would say in terms of an overall friction point for the game as it stands is that the onboarding of the game is really difficult, and it fits in line with the company's sort of MO. They like to do hardcore, not much hand-holdy of an experience, but it makes it really hard to learn the systems and the mechanics of the games a lot whenever you're kind of just fighting for survival. It's hard to kind of slow down and sort of see how all these different things interact with each other when the first level is so brutally difficult that you might not get to really get back to the previous level of engagement with a particular mechanic or system for multiple runs. Like, especially since all of the loot is randomly generated, you're you could get you could go runs and runs and runs on end without even getting the same equipment ever again that had a specific enchantment that gave you a skill. And so you might not even get to try out that skill again for a dozen runs. And that just makes it really hard to be able to sit down and kind of learn what works best for my play style or what works best for a particular character when you don't even really get that much time to experiment. Because there's been runs that I've spawned into heaven or hell surrounded by enemies on both sides without a really easy way out, and the run ending basically as fast as it starts. And so, in terms of getting a greater understanding of the game, that run was completely pointless. Like, I got next to nothing out of that run. I did not get a better understanding of how to play the character I chose. I did not get a better understanding of how the skills played into account. I did not get a better understanding of how attributes could affect the game and my progression within the levels. So it would be beneficial if there was a little bit more of a ramp that gave you maybe some more battle. Maybe there's some kind of battle that you could have in Purgatory, because that's where your runs start out. You start your runs by selecting a character in Purgatory, getting a chest full of some equipment, and then selecting if you want to go into Heaven or Hell. And I wonder if at the very beginning of the game there's some kind of like conflict that was happening in Purgatory, so you kind of have to successfully navigate some situations in Purgatory that are a little easier before going on your first run, or even if level 1 was just a bit easier, that could help. But I definitely could see players being turned away pretty quickly because they are just unable to get any kind of understanding of how to even really engage with the game. And because of this as well, I think something that's kind of tied to it is I wasn't able to really get a good idea of how the attributes affect things, the virtues and sins. Throughout all my runs that I did and I tried to experiment with those, I never really felt a significant difference depending on what I did with those attributes. The skills and the equipment that I had felt much more critical to my success on any given run than those virtues and sins. That might have made a statistical difference, but if you were just to ask me straight up, I'd say that I would feel like I could have put anything on the attributes, and the runs that I did well on would have been the same or close to the same regardless, because as long as the equipment and the skills were the same. So I still don't know. I don't know if that's just that attributes need to be a bit finer tuned so that there is a bit more immediacy, but also, like, I do understand that you do need some kind of level of longer term progression, because if you're trying to get through 7 levels, you don't want everything to feel like you're instantaneously more powerful at level 1, because you've got 7 levels of progression to kind of get through. So if you're trying to make a build that is focused heavily on a few select attributes should feel very different at the end of it than you do at the beginning. Again, this could come down to the difficulty and just me running into death a lot, that I had not ever gotten far enough for attributes to really make much of a difference. But in that sort of early point when you're experimenting with the game and with these early runs and dying a lot, it does make that sense of progression feel like it's not there regarding the attribute side. And there's some attributes that just feel like something that you should never take, especially with how hard level 1 is. Like there's some attributes that will decrease your health, and I'm thinking can barely get through level 1 sometimes, or get through a room in level 1 sometimes, and I need all the health I can get. Why would I even try to reduce my health? So I'm going to try to select the thing that says I can hit more, hit for more damage, and that has the least effect elsewhere, and see what happens, because otherwise it feels a bit futile to try and balance all of those little aspects of this decreases health, but it increases your hit chance, and this one increases your speed, but decreases your defense. It feels kind of futile to try and balance all those when all of it resets after you die anyways, and at this point in the game, I'm just kind of trying to survive. With all that being said, though, like, I don't want to make those minor frustrations and those friction points that I've discussed take away from the fact that I've had a blast playing this game. And as says before, I could put a couple dozen hours into the game as it is, just right now. Even with all of these little friction areas, these are not things that I think are big deal breakers that are going to be the death of the game or make this game completely unplayable or anything like that. And again, the thing that I keep coming back to as I kept playing this game was that even at times when I felt like I was frustrated with not being able to make progress to go down a level, each of the runs felt like a brand new opportunity, and it never felt like I was having to retread content, and it made going through each of the loops feel like a fresh experience, and it didn't get old. It was something that I could just keep going and going and going and going. And when it comes to a roguelike, like, that's the kind of gameplay you want. I never want to feel like it's a chore to go back to the start and try something new. It always has felt like a really good opportunity to try something new, to get a little bit farther, to try to die to a different enemy so that I could add them to the collection, stuff like that. And I enjoyed every minute that I played of it that way. And so some stats and other game info that I collected as I played. The best runs I got so far. In Hell, I got to the second floor twice. In Heaven, I got to the third floor once. That best run, I ended up getting up to a character level of about 4 or 5. I can't remember exactly, but it started to get high up there. My best runs were with either I ended up calling them the Tanky Boy duo. The Godly Terrapin is this massive turtle that it has a ton of HP. My best runs were done either with that or the Hell version of it, called the Crawling Forge, I believe is what the Hell version was called. Those two characters were what I got my best runs with. Between Heaven and Hell, I collected 11 of the characters of the different enemies, 6 from Hell and 5 from Heaven. And I only ever found one treasure chest throughout any of the multiple runs that I've done. I didn't even know that you could find treasure chests until one of my runs. I stumbled across a treasure chest and was like, oh my gosh, that's a treasure chest. And ever since then, I had been looking around on different levels to try and find them, and I did not see a single treasure chest after that point. So that was some information. That's a bit more in-depth talk about Lost in Prayer. In closing, it's already a very fun game. It's already very, very polished, and it has a ton of promise. I want to play the game more. I really hope they invite me to future playtests because I want to be able to play the game more, see how it progresses and improves before it launches. And I've got it wishlisted on Steam because I'm very interested to see where the future of this game goes. And since the playtest closed, they actually released a statement that gave us thanks for our feedback, but also talked about some things that they are looking to improve. And a lot of what they're talking about coincides with my experience. They specifically mentioned that under their note on balancing, that the first floor is much harder compared to the later floors once you get to them. They believe that it's too hard to focus on learning the game while being in survival mode right from the first floor, which I absolutely agree with, and I kind of echoed that sentiment here in the video. They said some characters are currently overpowered, where they specifically note the godly terrapin, aka the thick boy turtle, and we'll be working on adjustments. No, I like my tanky turtle, but they noted that because they note that with Lost in Prayer, they want every character to be a valid choice to win a run. And based off of my experience while playing the game, it's definitely not quite that way. The Godly Terrapin and the Crawling Forge were easily the best characters to take into any given run. They also note that they want to improve the onboarding, that they are missing some tutorial elements to make the game accessible to newcomers to the genre. But because they love Eureka moments and the joy of discovery, something that's part of Nine Dot Studios' DNA, don't expect a heavy-handed tutorial. So that's some of the feedback that they've given based off of what we've given them from the playtest, and I think those are all great things. Those are all saying and addressing a lot of the same things that I've talked about in here. So I think the future is very bright. These developers are listening and they're wanting to improve, and I can't wait to see where this game goes next. But that's about all the time that I have for tonight, ladies and gentlemen. If you liked the video, consider liking and subscribing. If Lost in Prayer looks interesting to you, you'll find a Steam link to the store page down in the description down below. Other than that, guys, I will catch you all in the next video. Cheers.